I'm Piet Smedy, Editor-in-Chief of House and Garden. And today we are going to be discussing spring trends because it's September, but more importantly, we're going to be looking at the way design has really adapted to the way we live, particularly in 2020, which has seen such a big shift just in our lifestyles, in our homes. And in our August-September issue, which is on shelves now, that was really like a big deep dive that we took to kind of understand how design is changing and how it's evolving and really what we can expect for the remainder of the year and going forward into 2021. So this is a conversation that I could not possibly have if I wasn't joined by our Decor editor, Edwain Steenkamp, who really is responsible for putting together a majority of the design features that go into the magazine, really unpacking a lot of what you guys see that we run in print. So Edwain, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to talk to you today. And yeah, like you said, it's such an interesting time that we find ourselves in. There's so much happening, so much changing. And I think that now, after a couple of months of this really strange period that we find ourselves in, it's the perfect time to talk about trends. I think now we're seeing so many exciting things happening. There's so much going on. The creative industry is completely booming. So it's really exciting to talk to you about it today.
It's so good to see you. Like we see each other like every single day, and now I think I've seen you like once since March. So yeah. This is a real treat. But let's dive right in and kind of look at the key elements that I know that you discussed in the issue, and just sort of that are on a much bigger scale. And I think we could never have this discussion without looking at working from home, which has just become everyone's life now. And the whole concept of home has changed so much from being a place, where you come to relax, or you come to, when you leave work behind, and now it is your office. So I don't know, for you, like, what would you say have been like the major takeaways in terms of creating a functional home office? I mean, we all started with like working at a kitchen counter or working at the living room table, but it's carried on for so long now that we've had to adapt and we've had to create spaces, I think, that separate home life and work life, and at the same time also just creating offices that fit the aesthetic of our homes. So it's not the sort of jarring differentiation between the two, but rather it becomes a seamless flow between spaces. I don't know, like what have been the big takeaways for you on this?
So first of all, if at the beginning of the year you told me that home offices would become a thing, I would have said absolutely not. So this is really a brand new trend, and it's really interesting to see, like you said, how it evolved. The first couple of weeks of lockdown, I think everyone was working at their kitchen counters, in bed, on the sofa. But when we really started seeing that it was going to be for the long haul, I think suddenly people were interested in office furniture for the home. And traditionally, these pieces have been very stark. It's been very industrial. It's been more towards the functional, hardworking side. But because this is our homes, and we're living in them like pretty much the whole day, we've seen that there's been more of a shift to pieces that can seamlessly fit into the home, pieces that are beautiful in their own right, and a need to, like you said, have designated workspaces. So we've seen really beautiful tables, really beautiful workstations come to life, where they're not only very functional with key elements like storage, hardworking surfaces that can be easily maintained, that can have a lot of traffic and work on them, but also that are made of materials that speak to a home life, so beautiful tones, things that are not so stark and so industrial that they look out of place. So that's really been something that we've seen a lot of, and continues to. I think the longer we're in this kind of space that we're in, we're seeing that people are really innovating these pieces to be very comfortable, very stylish, but still remain functional. And most importantly, that you're able to have, even in the smallest spaces, that there are furniture pieces that, you know, can fit into that, small petite desks that still maximize on functionality, that maximize on storage, that you can create these very tiny little nooks in your house, because yeah, not everyone has like the luxury of having like a whole room that they can dedicate to a home office. So that's something also that we've seen a lot of small pieces that are still very hardworking and very functional.
I think that's so true, especially with regards to how space has become this like ultimate luxury, where for many of us, we live in the city or we live in apartments. So obviously for those people, space has always kind of been something cognizant of, but I think for people who've maybe had larger homes and, like you said, have had rooms dedicated to certain things, these sort of designations, that's completely been like flipped on its head, because now, you know, you can't just have a living room space that maybe you only spend like a few hours a day in, because the whole family is in the house and you're all living in that space, and every space needs to be so hardworking. Do you think that, think about it now, like, do you think that when we start moving back into our offices, into office spaces, if that is the eventuality, do you think there are like lessons that we're going to take from this time, like from the things that we've learned from working at home? Do you think that there's elements that we'll be incorporating? I mean, I can imagine something like comfort would be a big one, because like you said, you know, we've had to really make our workspaces comfortable, because, you know, and our work days now aren't 9 to 5 anymore. I mean, we're constantly working and we're constantly engaging with those spaces. So what do you think that we could possibly be taking back to our offices one day when we do go back? That would be like great lessons learned to make our working spaces perhaps just more friendly and more like conducive to a work environment.
I think that something that a lot of people would have learned during this time is the importance of having a beautiful and comfortable space. So I think that when we do start slowly returning to work, and it will be a slow process, I think that what we'll really take with us is creating these small moments on our desks where there are these objects that inspire us, things that feel, you know, true to who we are as individuals. Most of us have been using these spaces not only to do work, but maybe to focus on more personal creative ventures. And so we are really developing a close connection to our furniture and to our decor in a way that we never really have before. So I think that once we return to the office, I think that we'll see that for a lot of people, it will be important not only to be comfortable, but to be inspired by the very little space that they might have, even if it's just a desk, to have small moments of decoration, to try and make the space as comfortable as possible while speaking to their own individual taste. So I think that that's going to be something that we'll see. There'll be like new life in the office, I think, across the country and across the world. People will bring a little bit more of their personality, and there will definitely be a focus on comfort. I think for a very long time, our workspaces have been so stark and clinical and a little bit cold. And I'm really excited to see how that's going to change and evolve.
And I mean, what a difference your eucalyptus is making. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And these are the kinds of elements that I think that, you know, you sometimes forget about in your day-to-day life when you're running around in the office. You know, but these are the small things that really make the biggest difference. Small living things, beautiful textures and materials that inspire you. It completely changes the experience of working and the experience of being creative.
Absolutely. And then on the topic of the experience of working, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, is functionality. And I know at House and Garden, we've been harping on about this forever. This idea that people need to start looking at furniture design as being very sort of multifunctional. And I think as broad a concept as that was, with lockdown, that's really kind of crystallized this concept that you can't just have one piece doing one thing, especially when you take into consideration like how limited space is, and everything needs to be working harder. We're working harder, so our furniture needs to be working harder. Yeah, like what I don't know. What do you think like is in terms of like where are we going with that on a very kind of pragmatic, logical furniture design perspective? Like, are we seeing pieces that are doubling up, are doing a lot more? And like, what should you, as somebody who's perhaps looking at buying new furniture or looking at changing things up because you are working from home, maybe permanently, yeah, like what are like some, I suppose, like life hacks, if you will, on furniture design that we should all be aware of and actually be like, that's a really good idea. I need to bring that into my home.
So there has been a couple of really exciting things that I've seen lately, and I think that some designers and some stores really have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening. Because just like you said, there has to be this dual functionality in every piece, especially if you're living in a small space. Every little piece that you incorporate or introduce has to be hardworking, because it's important, especially now, to separate that private life from your work life. I think that there are pieces that do that really well when there's a bit of storage space, for instance. I've seen some really interesting things, for instance, bedside cabinets that have ample storage where you're able to put your work things away. So your laptop and your papers and all your books and everything can be packed into your bedside table. The door can be slid shut and suddenly it's out of your mind and out of your sight. And I think that's really important. So something that is traditionally been where, you've kept your books and your glasses and your water jug and glass, now has this dual functionality of being a place where you can pack your work away. So that's just one small example of the kinds of functionality that, is really important. But there are also a lot of people that have made beautiful tables that can expand, beautiful tables that can work both as a working space and as a dining setup. So, look for pieces that, you can see very clearly it has a life in two different spaces and in two different scenarios. Because although we will be returning to work soon and life will return to normal, I think that there will still be a little bit of this 2020 that will remain. We will probably be working a lot more from home, if not on work, on our own creative spaces. So making sure that every piece that you have can serve one function, be that to be a dining space or a space of leisure, but also a space where you can be creative and where you can experiment with your hobbies, where you can really unpack things and then pack them away again. So for me, I think the most important kind of functionality there is this idea of being able to store things away, being able to pack things away, clear them away, and so allowing the space to be something completely different. So, yeah.
It's like there's this mega mindset change now, because I think maybe before we kind of looked at pieces as, like this is a piece for that space, this is a space, because that was how it always was. And with everything that's happened this year, kind of the rule book is just out the window. And which is, I think it's been very liberating in a creative sense for designers, and just, because we've had to adapt so quickly and we've had to kind of figure out how to make it work. That because there are no more rules, we've kind of been able to just go wild and really break down those boundaries. And so, as you know, like I've hosted some other talks for homemakers on this platform. And one thing that came up the whole time, and it's come up again now with you, is this whole move to decluttering and to sort of creating spaces that are calmer, but also very personal. So it's kind of like, I suppose you could be like Marie Kondoing your space, but at the same time, it needs to spark joy. You need to have spaces that speak to you personally. And I think given where we're at and where our mindsets are at, and it's been a very sort of unpredictable time and a very difficult time emotionally and mentally for us to process everything that's happening. You kind of need to create, exactly like you said, spaces that speak to speak to your personality and that have comfort and that have kind of a reminder just of home and of you. So I know at the magazine we often talk about micro decorating, which is pretty much what you're saying now, where you'll take a space, like a small space, so like your office desk, and then you'll micro decorate that space to achieve, you know, a beautiful look, something personal, something comforting. How do we balance that now? How do we balance that whole vibe of, I want to decorate all these little spaces and create these sort of nooks and moments in an interior that you know, that are beautiful and that speak to me as a person living in the space, without just piling on the stuff and creating this very cluttered environment, which I think again can actually feed into this sense of anxiety. If you just got all the stuff all the time around you, you know, it gets a bit much, and you're like, oh, how do you strike that balance?
I think that for me, what I've seen with what's happened over the last couple of months, and it's something that's really exciting, there's this movement towards every individual being a homemaker in one way or another, whether they're conscious of it or not. I think being in your space for such a prolonged period of time, where you've had to live in it and work in it and relax in it, we've really got this feeling for our spaces in a way that we never really have before. I find it's like a type of intuition, and so we're building these very personal and close relationships with our spaces, and it's really exciting. So I think that balance really happens in a very natural and organic kind of way, looking at how the space really works and how it makes you feel. I mean, I don't know about you, but this lockdown period has been a major declutter for me. I mean, I have been, you know, reviewing things, going through things, packing things away, getting rid of stuff that I no longer need. I didn't realize just how anxious my space was making me on a very subconscious level. It was only when I really started spending so much time in it that I realized I needed to really work with the space to make it something that speaks to me. So I think that a lot of people are going to be experiencing that. And I think it's going to be a very natural and organic process where people look at their space, they are going to get a good feeling about how it makes them work, how it makes them creative, how it inspires them. And so we're going to get rid of the things that don't speak to us anymore, and we're going to incorporate the things that inspire us. But to answer your question on a more practical level, I think that there are certain core trends that people can look into in creating a decorated moment in their homes. And I think that now more than ever, that old saying of less is more is definitely going to play. I think that it's about starting with a very neutral base and acquiring small, tiny little things that you can build up over a period of time that speaks to you on a very intimate and emotional level. Like you said, it is a very emotional time, and people have gone through a very difficult period. And I think that now more than ever, we are emotionally charged. And so I think it's just important to kind of look at that emotional state that we're in and build spaces where we feel safe and comforted, where we feel inspired. And I think that will happen naturally for every person.
I think it's so true how we're emotionally like involved with our living spaces now. I think that's been a big thing as well. And like you said, you know that how much I changed my place as well. I mean, it's been a lot. But you know, I've repainted the walls. Like, it's been a lot of pieces. Suddenly, it's like that's not working. I think we've come to like understand our living spaces a lot more and maybe appreciate what they need to do for us, and maybe not even what they need to do for us, but what we want from them. We've got to like
absolutely, yeah, and I think that, you know, living a life that is so busy and rushed sometimes, you know, we come home and we're just so exhausted that we don't always look at our spaces in that kind of way. So now it's really exciting to see how people are building this emotional connection with their spaces and with each item that they have in their home, whether it's furniture or decor or art. It's really, really exciting to see that emotional connection. I think this is definitely like a period in time where interiors are informed by our psyches and our emotions.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think for me, one of the things, and I know this is something as well that we often discuss, and going back to this being, as much as it's about where we are now, but also looking at where we're going forward, and how sort of emotionally invested we are in our spaces. I don't think you can have this conversation without bringing up the concept of color and how we're working with color in our spaces. I think we've got quite different approaches to how we work with color. For me, I don't know what you think, but for me, like this whole much darker interiors, I've seen a lot more of it. I've personally done it in my own home, because it is like, we use the word cocooning a lot, but like it is cocooning and comforting, and you want to kind of create these spaces that envelop, rather than perhaps be stark or cold. So how do you see that being something that stays, this whole darker interiors, maybe moodier interiors? I don't know if that qualifies as a concept that we can, for the foreseeable future, kind of engage it. Because I mean, yes, you can change your wall color, but I think you do want to evoke something that is, like I said, like comforting and personal.
No, absolutely. I think that the whole idea of bringing in color has changed so much over the last couple of years, and I think that over the last 2 years especially, we have seen this tendency towards deeper and moodier colors, whether that's a very dark color like the color that you have on your walls, or maybe just shades of brown. There is this idea of warmth more than ever before. And I love seeing how that kind of gets reflected in every aspect of the home. So like you said, it has this kind of cocooning feeling, and how that's reflected in materials that are brought into the home. So echoing kinds of like textural elements, materials like linen and cottons and wools. It's been like quite a beautiful kind of movement towards warmth and cocooning. And I must say, I'm enjoying seeing that, like this movement away from the kinds of interiors that we've seen for such a long time in the previous decade, where it was like, super minimal and a lot colder. So I'm loving seeing this like warmer, more textural kinds of interiors. Yeah.
I don't
know if I've answered the
question. No, I know you did, and you could be like brought me to something else actually that I know we talk about a lot as well, but it's so true, and I think we're seeing it even more now, is how like we're bringing so much more in terms of like tactile, natural materials into our homes. I mean, we all know that everybody is now like a plant parent and everybody's got 400 fiddly figs at home. But I think we're also seeing a lot more in terms of like timber and, like you said, linen, natural stones, concrete. Concrete's a huge one that we've seen coming in. And I think with concrete, I think there's that misconception that it's cold, but it's not. It's so textured. You almost get like a terrazzo effect from it. And the other thing with these materials is they're sustainable. And of course, sustainability is a big topic in design. It has been for a while, but I think now more than ever, we're so aware of the world around us, and we're so aware of like, where is everything coming from? Is it sustainably produced? Is it locally produced? And the local design scene is something we still need to get to. But you know what I mean? We're so much more aware. I think the millennial market and Gen Z and moving forward is so much more aware of where things come from, which is very important. But at the same time, you know, those materials are also bringing in this, this sort of, I was reading this article the other day about biophilic architecture, which is basically an architecture that's about connecting us with nature. And that for me, I think, has become a really big thing. Like we're seeing us wanting to bring nature and the natural world into our homes, whether it's in the form of plants, whether it's in the form of, you know, rattan and seagrass and marble and, you know, timber furniture, and it's, you know, and especially pieces also that have been crafted and handmade rather than something that's mass produced. I think we're seeing a lot more of that as well. Yeah, I just, that for me is a very big move that we're noticing. And along with that is this idea of buying and supporting local. And I know this has been something that you've really been driving in House and Garden, is actually championing local designers. Like, why do you think we're seeing this big movement now? I think, and again, something that I think buying local has always been a thing, but now, you know, in lockdown and the effect that that's had on the industry, it's become such a salient, top of mind concern for homemakers.
Absolutely. I think that for a while now, there has been a very slow movement towards looking at local talent, looking at sustainability, looking at what the creative industry around one is doing. But I think that it was really the lockdown that accelerated that. Suddenly, we've just been, you know, in our phones, reading, looking at magazines, like our whole kind of point of view has changed. And so we've really been able to concentrate and really take note of what people are doing. And what's really exciting for me personally is seeing all of these creatives that have been sort of isolated. And so they have really been focusing on their craft, and the most amazing things are coming to life. It's just absolutely beautiful to see that through such a difficult time of hardship in many ways, that creativity and design is just bursting and blooming. It's really beautiful. So seeing these local artisans and creatives that are creating things that really speak to a sort of contemporary way of living. So like you said, more natural materials, like we said earlier, things that have actual functionality, and seeing how they are speaking to a consumer in ways that they've never done before. I find that really, really exciting. And then touching on, yeah.
No, go.
And touching on some of these materials that you spoke of that we're seeing so much of at the moment, like seagrass and rattan and wood, what I find so exciting is that for a while there was a little bit of like this exclusivity about it, but I'm really seeing everywhere I go into what could be considered, you know, very general design or decor shops. There are pieces that are so affordable. There are pieces that, you know, anyone can buy into. And I love that these trends are really finding a place in the market where everyone can participate and everyone can have fun with it. I think that that also touches on what we spoke about earlier about everyone is really having a moment to be a homemaker. And it's really exciting to see that design and decor, both on a mass market and locally made by artisans and designers, are finding a moment where they can be accessible and affordable, and that everyone can have access to it. It's really exciting.
I think we've really seen exactly what you're saying. I think what we've really seen is this move in design towards humanism and towards it being about people. Yeah, I think for a long time maybe design was solely about the actual design and about the pieces, perhaps not always taking into consideration who can access this, you know, how is it working with people. And yeah, and I think that's a really great point. I think maybe that's the biggest trend really that we've seen emerge, is this human connection to design, which I think is something that we're all looking for in our homes. It speaks to our emotional connections to our homes. And I think it's got like a feel-good factor to it.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. And I think that what is really interesting to see is that, you know, you can go into social media right now and look at, you know, people who are creating things, ceramicists and artists who are, you know, booming, and they're becoming almost celebrities in their own right. And it just shows you that there is this hunger from the consumer to see these interesting, creative individuals with a particular point of view, a particular craft. They want to see it and they want to buy into that. It's so exciting.
And it's relatable. I mean, you know, us looking at pieces that are designed in South Africa and in Africa by African and South African designers, those designs are something that we can relate to because, you know, the way designers are living their lives is the same way we're living ours. Where instead of buying in designs from Europe or from the States or from Asia, you know, we're actually carving these identities and these narratives that we, you know, that speak to us and speak to the way that we live. And I think that's a really great takeaway. Edwain, thank you so much for today. This has been so awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so wonderful chatting to you, and yeah, I'm really excited to, you know, get back to work one of these days, back to some level of normalcy.
I know, and yeah, back to seeing other people. But thank you very much. This has been so great. Chat to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.